But characters in general, right? So all characters in in all the movies, they are so colorful and they have so fleshed out personalities. It's
Yeah.
very fun to watch them, especially during the mundane interactions.
So that's one thing, because generally in movies you don't have those long scenes where characters just talking about like everyday things. But here, like, he's using that thing to flesh out the characters, and that too without boring the audience. Like in the Kill Bill, you have the story about Superman and Batman. So, like, when the bride visits Bill,
Batman is
so
actually
there, I
Bruce
think,
Wayne. Spider-Man is
1 hour
actually
left
Peter
in the
Parker.
movie.
Oh, wait.
That,
That was
When
not a
that character
trivial
wakes up
talk.
in the morning, he's Peter Parker.
That
He
had a
has to put
very
on a costume and
significant
become
purpose to it.
Spider-Man.
And even the bride questions,
And it
like,
is
why are you
in
telling me
that
all this superhero
characteristic
stuff?
yeah.
And he's
Superman
like, wait, I'm
stands
coming to it.
alone.
It's
Superman
like,
And
can become
which
yeah.
is
Superman.
like it is a deep
Superman is
philosophical
born
thing, right? It's
Superman.
not even
Hmm.
superhero like surface
Yeah.
stuff and about how Clark Kent is born superhero and the others aren't. Like I like that point that you're mentioning about the casual conversations is I think only I noticed it to happen only in Pulp Fiction
When?
where they're talking about like in general throughout the movie they're talking about random foot massages or
Correct.
burgers.
Yeah.
So
See,
About
definitely,
burgers are like, if you're going in that direction, then the burger scene in the room, like when he grabs his burger and eats it.
Mhm.
So that I think was like not only for like a character, means had also an alternative motive, like to show his dominance over like the
Yeah, I'm
other
not
person.
talking about that burger scene. I'm talking about like you're saying you have long scenes where the character is talking about everyday stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think that only happens much like to a large extent in Pulp Fiction.
Okay.
Everywhere else, it's more structured conversation towards some final goal, like the goal that relates to the main theme. Maybe Hateful Eight has a lot of this talk, but
Yeah,
it's more about character fleshing.
let me just interject. So while,
yeah.
like, I also said the interaction point of view and quote unquote seemingly mundane things in the way Rati said and not in the way Kshitij said. I'll just put it out there now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you guys are correct. Like, yeah, Pulp Fiction
Yeah.
is the only one.
Like Pulp Fiction has a very heavy focus on it. They, like almost all movies have this thing, right, where they're
Yeah,
talking
but
about normal things in life, but what it does is it helps flesh out the
yeah,
characters as a whole.
they
But in
have
Pulp
like
Fiction,
other
it is
purpose as well.
but in Pulp Fiction, it is so drawn out that it becomes very noticeable.
Hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's
It is
like you just come from Amsterdam and you could have said that in two sentences, but you have a like 5 minute sequence
yeah, yeah.
of them
Hmm.
talking about Royale with cheese.
but the way Samuel L. Jackson uses that information when interrogating
Yeah,
the person, that was so hilarious.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's like he's setting up his dominance in every way, right?
yeah,
exactly.
Making the other person feel small.
yeah.
Right? Just that interrogation, like it justified so many memes that I've seen over the years.
And just think about like there was this other aspect also, right? Pulp Fiction has so much in it content-wise, but it
Hmm.
still does not feel overwhelming at all.
Yeah,
Like that's where I draw the line, right, Rati? I didn't enjoy it because I was overwhelmed. But again, right, again, the entire headspace argument and all that things not in the right mindset. But continue, please. What with the point you were making?
Like that's the thing, right? If you think about it in the grand picture, like the 3 hour movie was about a couple days worth of their lives, nothing
yeah,
grand, nothing that spans multiple decades. Like if I were to compare it to some of the previous super hit gangster movies, something like Godfather.
hmm,
So you basically trace the character's entire journey, starting out in his career to towards the end. Whereas here you have maybe like a week's worth of their lives at max. But it's so much in detail, yet it never feels overwhelming.
yeah. Like one of the perfect example of like a day in a life story. Like you just have a day
Yeah.
in character's life.
I mean, I was thinking like what other types of movies do this. And
Mm.
then the ones that I was able to come up with were like the typical spy movies. Like you have a James Bond movie, you have one mission,
Yeah.
one task, one small task of his career, and that is like stretched out into a movie. Like, but the way it's very differently portrayed here, as you mentioned,
Mm.
the non-linearity. But what about the supposedly convenient inspirations that Tarantino has taken? Some might even go to call copycat.
It's one of the famous quote in art, like art field, like if you're copying, so it's a bad thing, but yours like copying and using it in a certain way that it doesn't feel like a ripoff, then
Mm-hmm.
it's a good thing because you can't generally create that much of new material because one thing on another would like someone had tried it before. So the thing is like you take inspiration from them, but don't make it look like that. Okay, it's like you are just ripping them off.
Yeah, that is a skill. But then, like, how far would you go with the line? So, for example, that famous dance scene from Pulp Fiction,
Yeah.
it's like very similar to
Hmm.
something animated, right? About cats.
Cats.
I
Yeah.
I remember it was about cats,
Yeah.
and it was.
Other part, like the Wilson's part, was also taken from another movie.
I mean, yeah, like he has a lot of inspirations,
Yeah.
but then you also have to give him credit, right? He can like I think he like if you just look at Pulp Fiction and the number of references, it'll easily be like at least 20, 30 movies
Yeah.
and very small parts of those movies. It's not like
Yeah.
he's taking large chunks out.
Yeah. Another thing that I had seen was like I don't know the source, but it was mentioned that like while writing his script in this
Hmm.
beginning, he has like okay, so like these are the movies that I have taken inspiration from, and so things like that. And for the Reservoir Dogs, actually the Mexican standoff thing and all was copied from an Hong Kong movie, but
So
that
wasn't it from the good, the bad, and the ugly?
no, so the like the Hong Kong movie has copied from the good, the bad, the ugly.
Oh,
So you
okay.
can see the resemblance. So both of them are very much similar. Like even the ending scene, like
Ah, I
the
see.
gun placement and all.
Like
So,
specifically on this point, right? It's
Mhm.
one thing that very much interests me is like whenever you look at critiques of Tarantino, right? Both the positive, like the positive critics and negative critics, nobody uses this aspect of Tarantino in a negative light. And again, right, this is a very cursory thing that I've seen, but like the
Hmm.
positive people will talk about this in a way, right, in a very loving way, where they talk about Tarantino using these influences from other media and how it essentially talks about his love for media as a whole. And the
yeah.
negative critics, they don't even mention this point. He's just copying things, right?
I
And
mean, he's not actually copying things. Like
exactly right.
it
And
doesn't
so
feel out of place.
exactly right. So like when you think about, right, when I first heard about this point, I expected, right, like you would find some very harsh critiques, like he doesn't really have much originality on his own and things like that. But the shocking absence of this like speaks to how well he integrates all these different ideas into his own movies.
Also goes to show his expertise, right? Like
Yeah. So
one thing
that's
is to
hmm.
find a movie and then see a scene and then he's like, oh, I'm going to use that. And the other thing is like you have this entire is like decades worth of Hollywood is pretty much up there his head. And then he's like
Yeah.
pick out parts, bits and pieces from here and
Yeah.
there and then just integrate them perfectly.
Yeah. And
Mhm.